Hello and welcome. Now, the President of the Senate, Bukola Saraki, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Yakubu Dogara, has replied the national leader of the All Progressives Congress, Bola Tinubu, over his comments, accusing the two presiding officers of the National Assembly of budget impropriety. I'm David Alabi, and many thanks for joining us on today's edition of Plus Politics. And joining me in our Lagos studio, we have Martin Slimba, a political affairs analyst. Good evening. And we also have as well Tony Folorunshaw. Good to have you join us now.
Thank you so much, David.
Let's start with the back and forth between Bukola Saraki in a statement on Sunday, and we've had responses, reactions from Yakubu Dogara as well as Bukola Saraki based on all of the allegations that have been leveled against them when it comes to budget pardon. Now, Tinubu is very specific on this issue. What do you make of the back and forth?
My impression is that Bola Ahmed Tinubu is an ambitious man, and I also believe that he is determined to get his pound of flesh from whatever it is, the altercations he was having with Bukola Saraki specifically. Dogara is just an appendage because he's also part of the National Assembly. Yeah. That is my impression. Now, what exactly is the problem? The problem, according to Bukola Saraki, which is also verifiable, was that sometime in 2014, prior to the 2015 elections, Bola Ahmed Tinubu was supposed to be the running mate of Muhammadu Buhari. And for some reason, he felt that a Muslim ticket wasn't right, wasn't ideal for Nigeria. But again, don't forget that General Obasanjo also came to say that, no, that won't be right. However, Saraki wants us to believe that between then and now, Tinubu has not forgiven him. That is the impression that I have. Having said that, I also believe that Tinubu, for the purpose of our own democracy, evolving positively, I think that he is somebody that needs to be checked. He needs to be checked because the kind of politics he's playing, I don't think it is very healthy. And I'll give you instances. Money politics, that's the first Nigerian that will see bullion vans go into a private residence. That's the first.
These are still allegations.
Just a minute. We saw the footages, everything is in public domain. Now, the kind of politics he plays, like I said, I don't think is very healthy. Now, you must know that if our leaders are very circumspect, yes, they will discover that it might have even been to the benefit of Nigeria that Saraki emerged the way that he did. How do I mean? If you look at the Lagos scenario, an incumbent governor was just like a piece of tissue paper, simply because of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu factor. Now, if that had played out at the center, for instance, that Buhari had to beg for his survival, how will the rest of us feel? The conclusion for me is that whatever it is that Bola Ahmed Tinubu is flying right now has a lot to do with his future ambition, which is not very far from now.
Some people have said that it's having to do with his presidential bid come 2023. But Tony, now, do you also think that this is a battle of personalities instead of performance?
Well, I will start from the performance. That's where you stopped. I believe in Nigeria context, the word budget pardon has lost its original meaning. I'm going to talk based on economic meaning. Well, the reason why we have budget pardon in the first place is talking about when we have the issue of inflation, such that some analysts came up that, okay, probably between the first or second quarter, this is what the inflation we're talking about. So the government will have to guide against that. The secondly, when we have some special projects that involve more of international interventions and the like. And thirdly, the issue of exchange rate fluctuations, which is determined in the world markets. So we tend to have all of that. But
in all Nigeria of Tinubu's flags that is raised, he didn't raise all of these issues.
I'm still going there.
Distortions, the delays, and etc. were
intentional. So in Nigeria, when we have budget padding, the National Assembly are being accused that they removed some certain items and they added their own, such that, let's say, the government said, okay, we want to spend 20 billion on health care, and then the House decided to approve just 5 billion and use the rest 15 billion for their assumed projects, which will be bonded by the government. So in this case, they tend to come up with probably construction of road, constituency projects, waters, and the likes. So these are many more issues are what Bola Ahmed Tinubu leveled against the National Assembly. And let us hold on to one fact. It is simple. He has been a senator, even if it's just for 22 months. He has been there. You know how the game is being played. It's just like two people chasing each other based on one grand data, which I don't want to explain into detail. That is just it.
And do you think, so far, with all of these allegations, because some individuals have viewed these allegations to a certain extent and said, quantify this as defamation of character. But do you think the Saraki and the Dogara team, do you think they would seek legal redress? Because they've said either withdraw the statement or substantiate, prove all of these allegations. To say that it was budget padding from 2015 till now, the end of the 8th National Assembly, prove it or withdraw the statement?
Well, I don't see any legal case being pursued here if we need to face the facts. Because they are going to be dragging each other for years before they could even get into the root. For Tinubu coming out, see, let's focus on the message. It's not everything we play politics with in Nigeria. For every time we have all these sensitive issues to deliberate on that affect us as a people, we need to look at it holistically. Put the messenger aside. Focus on the message. Have we been having this issue right from time? See, compare and contrast between the 2017 budget and 2018 budget. It's almost the same thing. It's what we call copy and paste budget. Less researchable. They just lift a particular item for another year.
That's your own opinion.
Back to your question, I don't see them pursuing any court cases. They are all players in the game of politics. For him to come out, probably he has some evidence. That's just a fact. So I don't see any legal action or defamation of characters. Because the way those guys are even reacting, it's just
Let me remind you of some of the language that has been used in the back and forth. According to Yakubu Dogara, he says that he's not going to respond in this manner, having, how did he describe, saying running a child care center just because of Bola Tinubu. And Saraki has also said all of these allegations are careless, irresponsible, callous. You can't have such exchanges and tell me you don't feel smitten by any of them.
Well, I don't think that statement of Tinubu is careless or callous. I repeat, let's focus on the messenger.
Okay.
We've been having this issue of budget padding since the time of Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, when he was having a face-off with House of Representatives and the Senate as well, in short, the whole National Assembly. And this issue resurfaced again in 2016, if you follow up from 2016 up to date. So, Senate President coming to tell us that that statement is careless, I don't agree. I'm putting aside the messenger. I personally am focusing on the message. There has been some level of, see, budget padding is a criminal offense, corruption, which in any form would further impede our growth as a nation.
Okay. Now, quickly, Martin's Lumber, weighing on this matter now, some would also say, I know you are going to smile or giggle here, some would also say we should have investigation done. There is no smoke without fire. Period. Irrespective of whether or not this is a battle of personalities, let's just even do an investigation, because that's what happened in advanced climes. Beyond the whole back and forth, immediately there is an inquiry being done. Do you think we're expected to have some level of investigation done? And who conducts all of this investigation? Because from 2015 till now, and in its allegation, Tinubu says that, well, the delay and distortions and the feeding of pet projects and a whole lot more was what formed the pardon or assisted it.
First up,
who investigates what?
I believe that all of the allegations, they don't really hold water. I believe so, because a budget is a public document. And we have seen over time that this thing has been consistent over the years. 1 year goes, another year comes. You see virtually the same thing in the budget. And you also find that when you say padding, I give you bone, you put flesh on it. If I can show, or if I can separate the bone from the flesh, then it means that I can prove my allegation. But you find a situation where everybody seems to be enjoying the flesh that is on the bone, including the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, so to say. It's a mind-boggling thing. We need to be very serious in this country. We need to hold certain people very accountable. Otherwise, we cannot move forward.
Well, some people have also said, why cry foul now?
Just a minute, just a minute. The reality is that if we don't hold people, you see, machines, for instance, they cannot do unless they are instructed. It is a human being that will give the instruction. Again, the legislative arm of government, like Dogara said, he is not going to run a child care or daycare, whatever. What he's saying is that there are mature people there. You have committees in the House, you have committees in the Senate. When Tinubu was a senator, I dare say he was under a military regime. Perhaps they were running a diarchy.
Yes,
it is quite clear that the circumstances then are not what is prevailing now. However, the deciding factor in all of this is that civil society organizations, human rights bodies, they need to wake up to their responsibilities. I know that in the media we've been hearing a lot about SERAP. If we're going to have investigation, I would suggest that we have independent investigators licensed to get some of these jobs handled. Otherwise, we'll continue to go back and forth around in circles. Nigeria is in a deep mess, and unless we begin to pinpoint the people who are guilty, who have led us to where we are now, we cannot make progress.
But my question now still remains, why cry foul now?
At this time.
Yes.
When you say cry foul, I am saying I don't really see the foul. There is no foul play. You know why? Because this has been consistent from 1999. What is padded is the same thing when you say inflation of contract. At some point they say if you're going to bid, we want cross-bidding from different people. What do you now find? One businessman carries letterhead from about 4 companies. It's still the same thing. So if at some point you came with due process office, now what happens if you were bribing with 100,000 before? You're now going to make provision or allocation for due process office, so to say. You now increase the bribe to about 150,000. So what I'm saying, it is not about all of these institutions. We need to identify individuals and deal with them summarily.
But can we just agree now that it is within the powers of the legislature to make amendments, changes?
Certainly, certainly.
To the budget. And you cannot necessarily equate this to pardon. And this is Saraki's point of view, and I'm quoting here. He says, a good example is the decision by the National Assembly to include in the 2018 budget the 1% of the total budget amounting to 33 billion naira as allocation for the universal health coverage provided by an extant law which had been hitherto observed in the breach. And his question to Tinubu is this what Tinubu considers as budget padding? And this was the decision which was praised across the world as a real benefit to the ordinary people across the country.
The legislator has, the National Assembly has ample powers, authority to do with the budget as they please. That is the truth of the matter. When I say as they please, it doesn't mean that they will be foolish or take the rest of us as kindergarten or as daycare children. If you present a budget proposal, it is a proposal. It is a proposal because it will still face some form of amendment, some form of doctoring. However, they will call all those who brought the proposition to defend what they have proposed. And if you present a good defense, I don't see how anybody will want to alter what you have presented. If you need 100,000 to fix a road, chances are, if you do all of your estimations and they verify, maybe with surveyors, with engineers, nobody's going to tamper with your money. But if you come and you're telling some cock and bull story, obviously they will be convinced that you don't know what you're talking about, and they have every right to reduce the budget because you can't defend it. That is just what it is.
Okay, now Tony, quickly, do you think we can, at this point in time, the back and forth and a whole lot more, do you think people might for a second forget that this 8th assembly that we are seeing here being bashed in different areas, whether or not these are true instances, but they have had the highest number of bills been passed, no less than 282.
Yes.
So at this point in time, do you think Nigerians would have almost forgotten that these bills were passed and there were certain successes and not just be talking party politics?
Well, I believe most of Nigerians are reactionaries, such that we react based on the present situations. Average Nigerians, when they sleep, they forget what actually happened yesterday.
Exactly, because I asked this because so many people just remember the now, so to speak. We are playing neutral here, but don't you think in our discussions we have to take a sit back and...
Budget padding remains a problem. The fact that this is how it has been right from time doesn't mean that it should continue. I have a problem where the word doctor is being used in that context. How? I make a case here where a particular minister actually, with many facts, having researched little wide, that, okay, this is what we need for education. And that particular budget was cut or streamlined. So let me tell you, our budget should be need-driven. What do I mean? There's something we call felt need and assumed need. What our National Assembly what they always do right from time is what we call assumed need. In a community where we have 200,000 people, let's say a federal constituency, or let's say a senatorial district where we have a 500,000 people or 1 million, and let's say you facilitated a project, fine, you impute it in the budget, and then it was approved. Say a solar power light. Then you put that solar on your street alone. You are depriving like a 500,000 people for that same thing. Now, back to your question. Like I told you, Nigerians will react based on the current scenarios. The fact that they've passed the highest number of bills, they've been so outstanding does not mean that when we have a case to answer or something to deliberate on, then we should cross-carpet it. Like he said, some civil society group, prayer group, should start coming on board, start demanding for questions. Let me tell you, I keep reiterating, the person who is coming out to tell us that there has been some level of fraudulent activities in the level of Senate when it comes to issue of budget padding, that person too has some questions to answer, like he said. But then I'm so concerned about that subject matter, the budget padding. See, I've actually done a lot of research. Year-on-year basis, our budget keep on increasing. Go and check. Check from 2014, 2013 up to now. Check which items reduce, which item increase, how we are doing with capital flow, everything. Are you getting it? So the problem is actually based on the fact that there is no sincerity. Before we could move from here, let's do what we call opinion sampling. You move from all the geopolitical zone. Ask questions, engage people, do a town hall meeting. What do you need in this particular environment so that we can provide it? Not that some certain number of people will sit down in Abuja and decide for you and I that, okay, a minister has proposed that, okay, this is what we need in the area of healthcare, in the area of education, in the area of infrastructure, and somebody felt that, no, this is too much, we cannot have this. This is what I felt that my constituency have. Okay, now, Martin. The beauty of democracy is to argue, not to argue blindly. Juxtapose issues, let us come with a conclusion. Should this thing continue? What are the possible solutions? How can we move away from this? And I believe our politics is maturing.
Martins, now moving away from this cycle where we always see budget pardon raising its ugly heads, by June now we'll have the 9th National Assembly kick into full force. How then do you think we should be getting things right this time around, preferring solutions to this menace called budget pardon?
Okay, first off, I think that if we're running democracy, it simply means that all the levers, all the controlling gears must be given room to express themselves. They must feel liberated. They mustn't be under any shadow of, if you like, external interference. Simply put, the 9th Assembly, they should go about electing their leaders. You know, we've returned to that same thing again. The party is saying this is how we want it and all of that. This is Nigeria. Anything can still happen. However, I wish them well. I believe that this time around they'll get their acts together. Nobody is going to assemble in some hotel. They are all supposed to gather right within chamber, you know, of the National Assembly and elect their leaders. That's the first way to start. And then, of course, secondly, I think that most of the things that they deliberate on in the National Assembly, all of those things need to come into public, if you like, discourse.
Yes.
All of these things that they say, town hall meetings and what have you, not necessarily so. Sometimes you look for those who have, if you like, the background knowledge to some of these things to help the rest of us to digest what it is that they are presenting. And hopefully that way we can do better.
Yeah. So in your last words now, with all of this back and forth going on now, how do you think we can also put an end to this frosty relationship that we've seen between the legislature and then the executive? Because that's what has also led to this weakness, to this support that has been thrown behind Femi Gbajabiamila and Ahmed Lawan now. Do you expect we'll see a seamless relationship, and to what extent do you think this time around that would yield dividends of democracy spread across each and every Nigerian?
Well, I think I was here like 2-3 weeks ago, and that was what we discussed on. And I said, what happened in 2015 is gradually playing out now, where some party blocks, some power in the APC felt that this is the person that should be speaker, this is the person that should be Senate president. But away from that, where the beauty of democracies is, like I said, is when we argue things out and juxtapose. The case might be different now. The APC, they have more number of senators. But at a time when the party chairman came out and said that this is who is going to be our Senate president, I think that is what we call the timing is not really appropriate, because that would have given the other side to do a lot of permutations, politicking and the likes. But well, there won't be huge difference like the last time of 2015. Definitely whoever APC wants, or let me say ruling party, might end up winning that particular house seat. But the but there is there should be level playing ground. You don't see, these are senators. They are representing a particular district, not even a constituency. Allow them to do what we call a democracy whereby they choose for themselves. Even in ordinary classroom of nowadays, those guys, those pupils get to choose who lead them in the class, not to talk about the level of our National Assembly. So I don't know. I'm not concerned about which party presents who. What I'm concerned about is competency. Are you driving our national goal with us? All this issue of budget padding, are you going to do something differently? And lastly, there should be a level playing ground. Well, enough of all this noise here and there. Let's focus on national development, because everything is not really rosy.
Thank you very much for your contribution. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Toyin Folorunsho, as well as Martins Lumba, both political affairs analysts, and hopefully Nigerians, as well as the country, our state and federal actors, learn a lesson or two from all of these intrigues, and we don't make the same mistakes twice, as we've seen it happen. Well, it's time to take a quick break. When we return, we'll be looking at the increasing wave of insecurity within the northern part of the country and the rest of Nigeria. Do stay with us. And thank you very much for still staying with us on today's edition of Plus Politics. Now, the presidency earlier today, Tuesday, replied a Catholic priest who accused President Muhammadu Buhari of not doing enough to check the incessant violence across the country. In a statement by President Buhari's spokesperson Garba Shehu, the presidency also blamed community leaders for the incessant violence across the country. What do we do about this insecurity as it has become alarming? I still have with me Martin Slumber, a political affairs analyst. Thank you very much for still staying behind.
Pleasure.
Now we are going to have another engaging discussion. The recent killing of the British aid worker Faye Mooney, as well as a Nigerian counterpart, that's Matthew Oguche. This once again has raised concerns beyond the shores of Nigeria and the international community over the spate of insecurity in the country. Rising, alarming. What do you make of this?
It is rather unfortunate, but it goes to show that for too long, far too long, we have been pretending about the gravity of insecurity in Nigeria. The truth, to my mind, is that a lot has been put under hush. They don't want the truth to come out. The government has refused to admit that, to a large extent, it has failed. It is also possible that it doesn't have the capacity to deal with the situation. How do I mean? If for some reason you say that you have technically defeated Boko Haram, you have technically checkmated, if you like, the insecurity across Nigeria, then how come that the spate of killings, the rate at which people are being kidnapped, being maimed, being raped, has fallen out of numericals, let me put it that way. Counting has become a huge burden, and it is no longer news that we've lost over 5,000 souls in Zamfara alone, this 2019. That, to me, is not something over which we should say yes.
In Lai Mohammed's counter-reaction now to this that you just said and so many others, he said, well, if we are looking at, to an extent, the level of depreciation in the efficacy and then efficiency of Boko Haram insurgents and other miscreants that have already caused violence and killings and all of those within the country, take a look at 2015. Before you criticize, look at what happened in 2015, the state of security. And now, we shouldn't be so harsh on them.
Let me put it this way. We are very unlucky to have in government today, and I'm saying this with all responsibility, people who take delight in falsifying truth, in falsifying reality.
So you're saying they are telling different narrative than the reality we have?
To be candid, it is really, really sad that we have the kind of people talk about our insecurity today that we have. Because as of 2015, we know that the elections were postponed, and they said we're going to take care of this particular challenge. And they were able to take care of that challenge, and elections held. Now, we have a situation where even when we can see a pregnancy, somebody says, no, it is overfeeding. What is the meaning of that? You know, it is annoying. It is irrational. It is provocative. Where we are now, we need to say these things the way they are. The level of poverty is a big challenge for this government. The level of ignorance is also a big challenge for this government. And then the trend, inflationary trend. You see, what drives insurgency? What drives crime? When people lack, you may either lack education or you may lack economic empowerment. And as a result, you begin to look for ways by which, you know, you can raise your head up and say, you know what, I'm not being defeated by the system. That precisely is the problem. Now we have a government that continues to churn out figures, forgetting that the figures don't really matter. What counts is value. Meaning that if I say to you, my handkerchief is 5 naira, and tomorrow you come to me and I say it is 50 naira, the handkerchief is still the same. Its value is what it is. It depends on what use you have for that handkerchief that will determine how I'm going to exchange it with you. Now, we have a government that has taken us from 5 naira to 50 naira and believes that we need to applaud them. But the truth is, we now have a handkerchief that has a lot of shredding. It's now, you can't really present it. That is the fact of the matter. And if you give me time, I can enumerate several instances.
Talking about the fact of the matter now,
yes.
Some would say that these atrocious killings now reflect the national character of Nigeria. Just a few days ago, we had Abike Dabiri Erewa saying that, well, whatever is going on in the UAE and other parts of the world where we see Nigerians not in their best behavior, that is not necessarily the picture of the everyday Nigerian we see here. But this time around, insecurity, killings, and lives, banditry, kidnapping, maiming, clashes, etc. You just name it in different forms. Terrorism. And you say this is not our reality?
Well, if we want to face our reality, it's relatively different from the kind of characterization that we want the rest of the world to see us as. I recall that several years back, we had, if you like, an orientation program where they said something like, not in our character. And in the end, you ask yourself, do we have a country? That is where we need to start this analysis from. There is no Nigeria. And I'm being honest here, and I'm saying it for a fact. Several people have said we're just a geographical expression. And what exactly are they communicating? They are communicating the differences in our culture, in our tradition, in our belief systems. For instance, Southern Nigeria, Northern Nigeria. For instance, Western Muslims, Northern Muslims. These differences are real. And the temperament of the average Nigerian, southern part of Nigeria, is relatively different from the temperament of the northern Nigerian. Now, so that we don't lose the context from which I am coming, we must understand that if I want a Nigeria, how do I go about it? We must address these fundamental issues. For instance, I'm from the Niger Delta. We do what we call federal allocation on the premise of oil. There is nothing wrong with that. How about gold? How about bauxite? How about diamond? We have all of those things in Nigeria, some of which have not been exploited. In any case, some of which are being illegally mined. And I understand that there are big players who are doing this illegal mining. No punishment, no whatever. And some of the banditry that we're talking about, because mind you, how do you finance terrorism? Some of the finances come from some of these illegal activities. Now, for a serious government, what do? You nip it in the bud and you take decisive action. But we have not seen that happen here.
Talking about taking decisive actions, now Atiku Abubakar has also said that for the fact that there is no punishment for crimes, this level of impunity would continue and criminals would be emboldened to
I can
continue
assure you
with
that
all
it will
of
get
this.
worse. And the danger in all of this is that let me take your mind to the kind of thinking that is very rife now in the Niger Delta area. We are all aware that in a little while, in another 5-10 years, we won't be talking about oil the way we're talking about it now. Now, what is the legacy of oil for the people of the Niger Delta? What you have is acid rain. What you have is devastation. The environment is ecologically an eyesore. What you have is a deficiency in infrastructure. What you have, dilapidated schools, what you have, and so on and so forth. We don't need to overflog that reality. It's not a sentiment, it is a reality. Now, when the oil is no longer there, what is going to happen? Some of the questions that will eventually come from the Niger Delta will be that, but this structure I'm looking at, oil is responsible for it, but it is not at my backyard. What is going to happen? Every now and again, you say that our brothers, our leaders are thieves or rebels. Adakaboro, Kensaroua, Alamiesia, and so on and so forth. These are issues, and it is in the best interest of all Nigerians to begin to engage this issue about this time. Otherwise, what we're seeing now is child's play.
Talking about engaging this issue as well now, the troops of the Nigerian army also arrested some traditional leaders in line with aiding
The happenings in
these
Zamfara.
bandits, armed
Yes.
bandits. Now, to what extent do you think this would serve as a
It all
manage the
depends.
situation?
See.
Because it's quite interesting to know that even the people within the communities are the ones also concealing these acts that
But
we
that's
are
precisely what I
going against.
I have been saying. By that I mean, you see, if I'm being fed by bandits, for instance, maybe they go, they exploit diamond, and they give me something from it. Don't forget, we're in this country, they said that Aneni, the famous robber, was like Robin Hood, steal from the rich and share with the poor. So each time you share with those who lack, they see you as a Father Christmas.
But where lies the conscience of the everyday Nigerian then?
You see, Nigerians are in different categories. We're not all the same, which was exactly where I started from. We're not all the same. And those who are interested in Nigeria are very few. The reality is that those who are in a position to help us bring about a Nigeria, they have abdicated that responsibility. It is not with the traditional rulers, it's not with the political elite. In fact, a good number of them don't understand the issues. They cannot honestly say they understand the issues. What precisely am I saying? You have a situation where, for instance, this president, Muhammadu Buhari, we are well aware that in time past, he went and put his support behind a Nigerian to be the scribe of the OAU then. And today, we are aware that he's building a railway from his Katsina all the way to Niger. What I'm saying in essence, there's really nothing wrong in being our brother's keeper. But some of these actions speak volume of his understanding of our domestic issues. It will appear to me that this president has an inadequacy understanding of precisely what we are facing, and he needs to be brought to that reality.
Now, the Sharia Council as well as the Arawa Consultative Forum have also said that looking at all of the killings, level of insecurity, kidnapping, banditry, terrorism, and etc. within Zamfara, Kaduna, Katsina, and Taraba, Benue states, it's grossly unacceptable and something has to be done. There must be a strong synergy and justice must be served as well. Talking about justice now, to what extent do you also see our judiciary also bringing some level of sanity to this matter?
Now you have seen the confusion in the judiciary. You have seen what just played out even in Anambra State regarding raping and all of that, kidnappings and all of that. Honestly speaking, this government has a talent for presenting the other view, that is their view, and at the same time shutting out everybody else. If today they hold me captive, you're not likely to hear from me again. You're only going to hear the government side, and that is a problem. Atiku says no punishment for crime. I agree. But I'm also saying the definition of crime is one-sided. By that I mean the IPOB. We found it so easy and so convenient to say that the IPOB is a terrorist organization. That was achieved in about a week. We have found it very difficult to say that headsmen are terrorists. We have found it so difficult to even label all of these things that are happening in northern Nigeria, terrorism or insurgency. We are now enjoying the fancy word banditry. Are you with me? That simply tells me that there's some insincerity in the whole of this crime and punishment thing.
But Martins, now quickly, do you also think that now that President Muhammadu Buhari, he's our current president and is also the president-elect and is taking, well, he comes back again for another term, Do you anticipate that, having seen all of these reports and these calls, both from local and international bodies, saying that the state of insecurity in the country is rising and alarming, do you expect to see any difference in his mannerism or approach to all of this, behind, putting aside all of the
we must know that over time, if you have not been able to demonstrate capacity in the morning,
no, on a clean slate now.
I know what I'm saying. If you've not been able to demonstrate capacity in the morning, chances are it is very unlikely that you'll be able to do that in the evening. Now, our president has come of age, and he himself admitted before his swearing in the first term, he said age was going to be a burden for him. So going into his next level, his second term, chances are we're going to see diminishing returns.
He said he's fit for the job.
He said so, but you see, talk is cheap. To say something and to look at the reality, they are two different things. I don't expect to see any improvement. I actually see things getting worse. And I also see the blame game continuing. And for me, the earlier we woke up to our reality, which is like Gerald Theophilus Danjuma said, he said there is an agenda of ethnic cleansing. We must separate that from whatever these people are struggling over, the bandits are struggling over diamonds, struggling over gold. That is separate. But we're also talking about land grab. People in Benue are shouting. People in Kaduna are shouting. People in Enugu, people in Anambra. A lot is happening. Even in Delta, I understand that some people cannot go to their farms unless they pay a certain royalty to those who, in quotes, are in charge of the farms now. The headsmen that are in charge. It's a big issue, and we need to be very, very sincere about tackling it.
And we cannot talk about insecurity and not also touch on that it's already 5 years since the abduction of some of the Chibok girls, and they've not been reunited with their families. And some would say that if we've had this situation last for 5 years, whether or not people get killed on a daily basis, but these are people that we are still hoping to a certain extent will return. And as a father, if your daughter was in the captivity of Boko Haram now, would you have an iota of hope in the Nigerian government to bring her back home? As they've always said, the federal government still stands on its ground that it is the father of all, the president still remains the father of all, and is concerned about every single life in this country.
So far, all their statements don't give much hope, so far. And even in practical terms, there's nothing to suggest that they're really pursuing, you know, the agenda of getting, if not all of the girls, but some of these girls back. And I still feel that there is something fishy about it. It's not about some theory or some sentiment somewhere. But, you know, we deduce from the facts. The facts were that at some point, like for Leah Sharibu, the last Inspector General said, yes, she was going to be released at some point, maybe in less than 24 hours, and before we knew it, the whole story changed. I see that there is some kangaroo arrangement. That is the way I see it.
Okay,
I'm speaking for
lack
myself.
of time now, quickly.
Yes.
We have an acting IGP. We've not necessarily had a change in service chiefs as well, but to what extent do you also see inter-agency relationships and ensuring that we move away from this increasing level of insecurity and then we have sanity, secure Nigeria?
I really wish that we had professionals handling our security, and I'm saying this in quotes. I'm saying this because I'm aware, and we're all aware, that a certain DSS chief was appointed by the acting president, you know, sometime last year. By the time Muhammadu Buhari came back, we know the story. Now, I am worried that as Nigerians, we cannot really challenge this government to say, you know what, federal character, professionalism, we need to look at outcomes, positive outcomes, to be able to say that, yes, this person can remain where he is, this person can remain. So far, I must tell you that on a personal note, I'm highly disappointed. You know, I'm highly disappointed by the presidency. I'm also highly disappointed by the military high command. I feel that they have not done justice to this our security challenge. And indeed, there is very little to expect from the judiciary as it now stands.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Martin Slumber, and hopefully, like I always say, we have to take cues and not necessarily make the same mistakes. This is a fresh, clean slate, and we have to do better.
We pray for their success.
Exactly. It's been an engaging and enlightening conversation. And we'll take Plus Politics packages, and when we return, I will definitely bring you my take. Don't go anywhere.
The hydrocarbon pollution remediation project, HYPREP, is worried that the insecurity of some parts of Ogoni land is affecting the ongoing cleanup of oil-impacted sites. The project coordinator, Dr. Mervyn Dekil, said this in Bori, Kana local government area of Rivers during a sensitization and town hall meeting with stakeholders in the area on the cleanup process.
HYPREP is deeply concerned that the contractors here have not been able to commence work on this side because of insecurity.
We lost our communities, our government have been poisoned and destroyed, and we ask ourselves, was that not necessary?
Gradually we will be there, but a bit of patience is needed. You know, involving the government, you have to be patient with government.
I was saying that I think our job as a traditional rulers is to go home and gather our youth and talk with them, to embrace the cleanup, so that the thing will move very smoothly.
Insecurity in Nigeria, apart from being the fear of every Nigerian, has become the watchword on the lips of everyone and a discussion topic where 2 or 3 Nigerians are gathered. This phenomenon is a state of being subject to danger or injury. It is the anxiety one experiences when one feels vulnerable and insecure. Several illegal armed groups, ethnic militia groups, religious fundamentalists, and fanatics are evidence of insecurity in our dear nation, Nigeria. These have given birth to a series of bombings, kidnapping, clashes, murder, arson, armed robbery, corruption, injustices that we hear every day. It is clear that these happenings are negatively affecting Nigeria politically, religiously, and culturally. We cannot afford to lose confidence in the law enforcement agencies and the entirety of government. So, as a nation, as a people, we cannot just sit with folded arms and watch pointed fingers. Your security, mine, the whole of Nigeria, is our responsibility, and we must work together strategically with one voice to reset the nation back to the right path. Thank you very much for being on today's show. I'm David Alabi, and make sure you join in on the conversation tomorrow as well, same time.